From the very first day Neil was born, it was clear there was something different about her. Unlike most babies who cry and fuss constantly, Nan came into the world quiet and calm. She didn't wail like others, she simply yawned, gave a tiny smile, and drifted off to sleep. Even the nurse who delivered her joked, "This one will love sleep, madam. She won't give you trouble at all." And true to that prediction, Neen grew up with a deep, almost magical love for sleep. While other kids in the neighborhood ran around playing, shouting, and chasing each other with sticks, Nen could always be found lying quietly in one corner with a wrapper over her head, snoring softly like a baby cow. Sometimes neighbors thought she was seriously ill. "Mama Nen, your daughter hasn't moved since morning. Are you sure she's okay?" one worried auntie once asked. But her mother just smiled and shook her head. "She's fine. She's just resting." That resting became a permanent state for Nene. No matter what her mother tried, nothing could shake Nene's attachment to sleep. Cold water didn't work. Her mother poured it on her mattress in the mornings, and Nene still managed to sleep on it like it was a warm cloud. Pepper under her nose, she'd sneeze 3 times and go right back to sleep. Alarms loud, screaming ones were useless. It was as if Nen's body had a contract with sleep itself. At school, it got worse. Neen would fall asleep right in class with a pen still in her hand, her mouth wide open like she was catching flies. Her classmates would draw on her face with red markers, take pictures, laugh, and she still wouldn't flinch. One day, her frustrated teacher lost it. "Nenyo, wake up." "What kind of spirit is holding your eyes shut?" Neen jolted upright, confused but still half asleep. "Sorry, ma'am. I was praying in my heart." The class burst into laughter when she added, "I always pray with my eyes closed, ma'am." The teacher narrowed her eyes closed. "You were snoring while praying?" And Nan, without a hint of shame, replied, "Yes, Mama, that's when I prayed deeper." The entire room erupted, but for Nan, it was just another day of being herself. Her mother, on the other hand, was constantly being summoned to school. One day, she sat Neen down and asked seriously, "Tell me the truth, are you tied to some spiritual coven of sleep? Do you float in your dreams?" But Neen just laughed and said, "Mommy, some people are born to sing, some to dance. Me, I sleep." Even as a teenager, Nen's bond with sleep remained unbreakable. She wore the label proudly, even calling herself the sleep ambassador. For her, sleep wasn't just a habit, it was a lifestyle. Conversations with her friends would often include grand declarations like, "My husband better understand that I'm not waking up early for anyone." She dreamed of a peaceful life filled with naps and relaxation, not one ruled by alarm clocks or early mornings. Her mother, of course, warned her again and again, marriage is not for the lazy. A wife wakes up early, prays with her husband, cleans the house, and still finds energy to love and care. But Neen just giggled and brushed it off. She believed that marriage would be different for her. She thought her future husband would love her enough to accept her gift. Everyone in her life, her teachers, neighbors, family, saw her sleepiness as a problem, but to Nene, it was simply who she was. She didn't see the need to change. After all, she had made it this far without ever letting the world rush her. Sleep wasn't her weakness. It was her comfort, her rhythm, her way of being, and no one could convince her otherwise. Despite her notorious relationship with sleep, Nen somehow managed to charm people wherever she went. She was effortlessly beautiful, cheerful, and had a personality that could light up a room at least when she was awake. That's probably why Obasi, a gentle and educated man with kind eyes and professor-like glasses, noticed her one Sunday at church. She had dozed off during the sermon and hit her forehead against the pew with a loud thud, causing heads to turn and her mother to bury her face in embarrassment. While she rubbed her aching head, a calm voice beside her whispered, "Are you okay?" She looked up and saw Obese. Trying to save face, she lied. "I was meditating deeply." Obasi smiled and replied, "You pray very silently." Neen giggled and acted modest, pretending that her mid-sermon nap was some kind of holy trance. After the service, Obasi waited outside to greet her again. They exchanged numbers, and from that day, a connection began to grow. Surprisingly, Neen had no trouble staying awake during her phone calls. She could talk and laugh with him for hours, full of energy, like the sleepiness switched off when the conversation was exciting enough. As their relationship grew, Nenen's sleepy habits started to show, but Obasi was too enchanted to care. He invited her to lunch at noon. She showed up at 2 p.m., unapologetically saying she'd overslept. He didn't mind. When she warned him one evening, "I like to sleep a lot." "I hope you're not the type that will disturb my destiny with too much shouting." Obasi laughed and said, "I'll be patient," and he truly meant it. Where others got frustrated, he seemed to understand. He saw something in Nen that was worth enduring a few quirks. Even her own mother was shocked. Obasi must be sent from heaven, she said more than once. He didn't just tolerate Nene's lifestyle, he embraced it. So when he proposed, Nen said yes immediately. They had a beautiful wedding with music, dancing, and laughter. Her mother, however, pulled Obasi aside before they left and gave him one last warning. "I hope your house is noisy enough, because if this girl sleeps in a quiet place, she may never wake up." Obasi laughed politely, having no clue how literal that warning would turn out to be. In the beginning, Nen tried. She really did. She woke up early, swept the floors, cooked for Obasi, and even joined him in morning prayers. Obasi was impressed and thought, "Wow, marriage is working like magic." But the honeymoon phase didn't last long. Within 2 weeks, old habits returned with full force. Nen started oversleeping, burned soup on the stove, and forgot to run errands because she napped through the afternoon. Once, Obasi came home to find her asleep on the floor, mop in one hand, bucket beside her. When he asked what happened, she said casually, "I felt a breeze and decided to rest a little." Obasi scratched his head, trying to stay patient. After all, love is understanding, right? But things only got harder. When Nena got pregnant, it was like she took a deep dive into sleep mode. She used pregnancy as a free pass to sleep all day, claiming her baby needed the rest. Even when Obasi caught her asleep mid-brushing with toothpaste on her chin, she insisted, "We are one. If I sleep, the baby sleeps." As charming as her excuses were, Obasi began to realize that patience had its limits. What started as an adorable quirk was now becoming a serious concern, especially with a baby on the way. And although he tried to stay strong, it was becoming harder to ignore the fear creeping into his heart that maybe love alone wasn't enough to keep things from falling apart. Motherhood didn't change Nen, not in the way people expected. If anything, it gave her another excuse to sleep even more. The moment she gave birth to their healthy baby boy, Obasi hoped things would finally shift, that maybe the presence of a child would awaken her sense of responsibility. But no, Nen leaned even deeper into her old habit. She slept through feedings, left the baby crying for long stretches, and left everything to her mother, who had come to help during the traditional Amugwo period. One night, Mom and Nen came into the room, holding the wailing baby, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "Nen, come and breastfeed this boy," she shouted. Nenny cracked one eye open and mumbled, "Just dance with him a little, he'll sleep back." Her mother looked at her in disbelief. "You want this child to survive on air?" During the entire postnatal period, Nen barely touched her baby except to nurse. She took resting to a professional level, ignoring the endless complaints of her mother, who left in frustration the moment the Amugwa ended. Instead of preparing for life as a new mom, Nen breathed a sigh of relief, saying, "Finally, I can rest from all her shouting." But Obasi wasn't having it. Without Mama around to help, the weight of parenting fell entirely on Nene, and it didn't take long for her cracks to show. One morning, she forgot she had left water on the fire for the baby's bath and fell asleep, only to be jolted awake by the smell of burning. She started trying desperate tricks to stay awake, chewing gum, slapping herself, putting her feet in cold water, but nothing worked for long. Her body always found its way back to sleep. Once, she fell asleep during loud music playing in the background. Another time, she dozed off mid-sentence while texting. But the worst came one day when Obasi returned home from work to a terrifying scene. Neen was passed out on the couch with her phone ringing under her cheek. When he woke her up and asked, "Where's the baby?" she lazily replied, "He was beside me. He'll come back." Panic hit him instantly. They searched the house, calling out Junior, Juju, and finally found the baby in the kitchen. Junior had turned the kitchen into his personal playground, spilled rice, beans scattered everywhere, Gary floating in water, and in the center of the chaos was Junior himself, sitting inside a bag of flour like it was his personal pool. He was completely white from head to toe, looking like a tiny masquerade. Just as Obasi spotted the child crawling toward an open container of pepper, he dove like a goalkeeper to stop him. That moment was Obasi's breaking point. He picked up Junior and rushed to the hospital without letting Nene come along. She pleaded, but he said, "Stay home and continue sleeping." At the hospital, Obasi paced like a madman, terrified his son might have ingested something dangerous. Thankfully, Junior was fine, just a bit of flour in the ear, but the emotional damage had been done. Back at home, Nena waited in fear, sweating under the air conditioner, fully awake for the first time in what felt like forever. When Obasi returned, he didn't say a word. He placed the baby on the bed, arms crossed. Neen tried to apologize, cried, begged for forgiveness, but Obasi was cold. "I have tried. I closed one eye, I even closed both, but today my eyes opened." His voice was tired, his heart broken. He told her she would be leaving the next morning, not with the baby, just her. "He's safer here with me," he said. Nen was stunned, dropping to her knees, but Obasi didn't budge. He had made up his mind. And just like that, her role as wife and mother slipped from her hands, not because she didn't love, but because she didn't act like she cared. That night, she cried herself to sleep on the cold floor, too exhausted to process how far she had fallen. The next morning, Nen stood outside her mother's gate with swollen eyes and a broken spirit. Her bag sat beside her like a physical reminder of her failure, and her heart felt heavier than ever before. When her mother finally came to the gate, she didn't greet her with sympathy. Instead, she frowned and said coldly, "Go back to your husband." Neen stuttered, her voice cracking. "Mama, he sent me away." Her mother didn't budge. "Good, then go back and beg him." Nini pleaded harder, nearly shouting, "I don't have anywhere else to go. Just let me in for today. I'll sleep on the floor." But that only sparked more irritation. "Of course, you'll sleep on the floor. That's your favorite thing." When Nen begged again, saying she had changed, her mother raised an eyebrow and asked, "How many hours have you stayed awake today?" Neen looked down and muttered, 2.5. Without hesitation, her mother slammed the gate shut. "Come back when you reach 6? Nen stood frozen, rain falling softly like the sky was mourning with her. She felt like a stray cat, unwanted and misplaced. With nowhere to go and no one to take her in, she wandered the streets, dragging her bag behind her like it weighed 100 pounds. As night fell, she found a wooden bench outside a small local beer joint and sat there, wrapping herself in a thin piece of cloth. For the first time in her life, sleep didn't come easy. The bench was hard, the cold bit through her wrapper, and the mosquitoes seemed to sing a mocking lullaby above her head. She curled up as tightly as she could, trying to find warmth in her own arm. She whispered to herself, "If I survive this night, I swear I'll change." Her stomach growled, but the regret in her chest was louder. By morning, she looked like a shadow of her self-swollen eyes, messy hair, and lips cracked from the dry night air. As she walked down the road aimlessly, she spotted a worn wooden sign nailed to a rusted gate. Night security guard wanted, no sleeping 12-hour shift. She squinted and read it again. No sleeping. Her first instinct was to walk past, but something pulled her back. She stood there in silence, staring at the sign like it was speaking directly to her. Cell? Winking directly to her. God. Is this a punishment or an opportunity? She whispered. Then, without thinking twice, she knocked on the gate. A big-bellied man with a skeptical face opened the gate. Who you dey find? He asked. I saw the sign, she said quickly. I want to apply. The man looked her up and down with clear disbelief. You into security work? You sure say you dey okay? Name straightened her back and replied, I can do it. I can do it. I need this job. After a short, unimpressive interview, the manager handed her an oversized security shirt, a dusty flashlight, and a whistle that looked like it hadn't been blown since the 80 seconds. Your shift starts 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. No sitting, no sleeping, no slacking. If we catch you dozing off, you're gone. That night, Neen stood guard like a soldier. The first few hours were fine. She walked back and forth, whistled every few minutes, and told herself she had finally taken control of her life. But by midnight, her legs started shaking, her eyes blinked uncontrollably, and her body screamed for sleep. To stay awake, she started singing Chewing Bitter Cola, slapping herself, and even praying out loud, Lord, hold my eyelids in place. When all else failed, she tied a rubber band to her wrist and snapped it hard each time she felt herself slipping. Some neighboring guards mocked her, calling her Madam Watch, but Neen ignored them. She had one mission now, to beat sleep. Neen didn't give up. Every night, she reported for duty at 6 p.m. sharp in her oversized security uniform, armed with nothing but a whistle, a flashlight, and sheer willpower. First, it was brutal. Standing on her feet for 12 hours straight, no sitting, no dozing, no mercy. It was like being in boot camp. The fatigue was intense. Her legs ached constantly, and her back felt like it was splitting in two. The night breeze that once used to lull her into sleep now felt like a slap to keep her awake. At 2 a.m., she'd chew cola nuts until her jaw hurt. At 3 a.m., she'd sing old gospel songs just to keep her brain alert. There were nights she slapped herself repeatedly or marched in circles until her knees wobbled. Even the mosquitoes biting her legs became part of the battle. At least the pain helped her stay awake. Some guards from nearby compounds made fun of her. You sure say you be woman, one joked. See as your eyes red like touchlight, but Nenny didn't care. For the first time in her life, she was fighting sleep, not embracing it. And strangely, that fight gave her purpose. Over time, something inside her started to shift. Her body adjusted. Her mind grew sharper. Though she lost weight and her skin became pale from stress, she had never felt so aware, so present. Day by day, she stopped being the girl who ran from responsibility and started becoming someone who could face hardship head-on. She saved every penny she earned, lived modestly, and avoided distractions. She didn't spend a dime on comfort, no hair appointments, no new clothes, not even soft food. Her focus was singular: redemption. 2 months in, she gathered the courage to return to her mother's house. She knocked softly on the gate, holding her security ID card in one hand like it was a badge of honor. Her mother opened the gate with her arms crossed. You again? She said. Neen nodded. Mama, I've changed. For real this time. Her mother raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. You've said that before. But Neen didn't argue. She lifted her foot and showed her cracked heels, then held up her work boots. I haven't slept in peace for 60 days. I work nights. I stand 12 hours straight, no chair, no nap, rain or shine. Her mother blinked, stunned. Slowly, she stepped aside. "Come in," she said. "You've graduated." From that day, Nene didn't rest literally. Her mother was shocked by the new version of her daughter. Nan woke up before sunrise, swept the compound, fetched water, washed clothes, even helped the neighbors without being asked. "Are you running for House of Assembly?" her mother joked one morning. Neen just smiled. "I'm practicing for my second chance." She wasn't just trying to prove herself, she was preparing for something bigger. She knew she couldn't go back to Obesi with empty hands and empty promises, so one weekend she went to the market with her little savings. She bought baby formula, new clothes for Junior, and a small set of plates to replace the ones she had broken while sleeping through her cooking. Then she took a deep breath and walked to Obesi's house. When he opened the gate and saw her standing there, holding her bag and a small plastic bag filled with baby items, he frowned. "What are you doing here?" She didn't cry this time. She didn't beg. She calmly handed him her ID card. "I'm not here to talk about promises. I'm here with proof. I work night shift, 12 hours, no sleep. I've been doing this every day since you sent me away." Obesi stared at the card, then looked at her tired eyes, sunken cheeks, hands that looked like they had scrubbed 1,000 floors. She had changed. She didn't need to say much more. He simply nodded and went inside. Moments later, he returned holding Junior in his arms. As soon as the baby saw her, he lit up with joy, kicking his feet. Nana ran forward and scooped him up, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "My Juju, my baby." And for the first time in months, Obesi stood there, quietly watching, no longer angry, just unsure, maybe even hopeful. Obesi didn't say much that day. He watched Nen play with Junior, quietly observing the way she held their son carefully, gently, like someone who had learned the value of what she almost lost. After a long pause, he said softly, "Junior misses you, and I do too, but I'm scared." Nee nodded. "I understand. I don't expect you to trust me overnight, but I'm willing to earn it one day at a time." Obesi sighed and pointed toward the house. "Go inside. Greet my mother. She's in the living room." Nen almost dropped her bag in shock. "You mean I can come in?" she asked, blinking through tears. "Don't over-celebrate," he muttered. "This isn't a full return." "I'm just watching you closely." She stepped inside like she was walking on sacred ground. Inside, Mama Obesi was sipping tea and watching African magic. Nen knelt in front of her and said sincerely, "Mama, I've come to beg with clean hands and a clean spirit." The older woman stared at her with tired but curious eyes. "So you're done with the sleeping ministry?" Nena smiled and replied, "I've left that ministry, Mama. I've joined the Department of Action." Mama Obesi nodded slowly, amused but impressed. "Okay, then go sweep the backyard. Let's see this new spirit in action." The following days were like a final exam. Nenwe woke up at 5 a.m., made breakfast, cleaned the house, helped with Junior's diapers, ran errands, and still stayed alert for anything her mother-in-law needed. She no longer waited to be asked, she anticipated. Obesi watched all of it from a distance, never saying much. He was skeptical. He had seen her make short-term efforts before. But this time was different. Nin didn't fake it. She wasn't just trying to look responsible, she was living it. One evening, Obesi came home from work and found the house clean, Junior fed and asleep, and then in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and humming gospel music. He walked in quietly and hugged her from behind. "You've done well," he whispered. Nin gasped and turned around. "Obesa, are you serious?" He nodded. "I've been watching. I needed to be sure it wasn't an act." She looked him in the eyes and said, "I'm not a movie anymore. I'm a real-life episode." He laughed and pulled her into his arms. "You fought sleep and won. You fought for this home." Nin smiled, holding back tears. "Thank you for giving me another chance." That night, she didn't fall asleep out of laziness, but out of peace. For once, she felt like she truly earned her rest. Nana's story may be wrapped in humor and drama, but it reflects something very real: how easy it is to take responsibility for granted when comfort becomes a habit. Many of us have our version of sleep. It may not be literal, but it could be procrastination, complacency, laziness, or simply the fear of showing up fully in life. Nini didn't change overnight because someone scolded her. She changed when life humbled her. When her comfort was stripped away, when her own child was put at risk, and when she was left alone in the cold with nowhere to go, that's when she woke up, literally and figuratively. Sometimes, rock bottom isn't the end, it's the turning point. And like Nina, the path to redemption starts with consistent action, not just apologies. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love or a second chance, but you do have to grow. In the end, Neen didn't just win her husband back, she earned her own self-respect. And maybe that's the real victory: waking up not just from sleep, but from a life lived on autopilot. Because in the real world, love may be patient, but it's not blind forever.